Hi guys, welcome back to Java Programming. This is episode 21 in which we are going to talk about exception handling in Java. So these are the contents which we'll see today. First we'll see an introduction to exceptions, then we'll see what are checked and unchecked exceptions. Then we'll see the exception hierarchy, then we'll see some exception methods, then we'll see how to catch exceptions, and finally multiple catch block. So let's start. Introduction to exceptions. An exception is an unwanted and unexpected event that occurs at runtime and hence disrupting the normal program flow. Now there are two concepts which you need to be aware of. One is error and second one is exception. An error is a serious problem which the application should not try to catch. So Stack Overflow error is caused by an infinite loop. It's a type of error. Then we have exception, which is a runtime condition that can be caught and handled. Now there are two types of exceptions, checked and unchecked. Checked exceptions are compile time conditions which are caught by the compiler. They must be properly handled by the programmer. Otherwise, the compiler will not allow you to compile your program. Then there are unchecked exceptions, which are runtime events which may include programming bugs. In this case, the compiler will allow you to compile your code, but at runtime you are going to get an exception. Now let's see an example of checked exception. So there is a class bkf file not found demo. This is a main method. We are using a file operation. So we have created an instance of file class and we are specifying a location of a file. Okay, so this particular code will not compile because it's a type of checked exception. This particular line of code might throw you an exception because there's no guarantee that there's a file at this particular location, and hence this line of code must be caught inside a try catch block. So this is an example of checked exception. Now then there's unchecked exceptions, in which the compiler allows you to compile your code, but at the runtime you may or may not get the exception. So for example, there's an array of integer. We have 4 elements in it and we are trying to access the 5th position, which is an invalid position. So this will compile fine, but at the runtime we are going to get an exception like this. Exception in thread main java lang array index out of bounds exception, phi at exceptions so and so class, main method so and so, line number so and so. Okay, now let's see the exception hierarchy. There's a throwable class which extends from object class. Then this throwable gives rise to errors and exceptions. Now in exceptions we have checked and unchecked exceptions, which we have already seen. Now let's see some exception methods. There's a get message method which returns a detailed message about the exception that has occurred. This message is initialized in the throwable constructor. Then there's a get cause method which returns the cause of the exception as represented by the throwable object. Then there's toString method which returns the name of the class concatenated with the result of get message. Then there's a print stack trace method which prints the result of toString along with the stack trace to system array, the error output system stream. Then there's get text trace method which returns an array containing each element on the stack trace. The elements at index 0 represents the top of the call stack, and the last elements in the array represents the method at the bottom of the call stack. Then we have fill in stack trace method which fills the stack trace of this throwable object with the current stack trace, adding to any previous information in the stack trace. Now let's see how to catch exceptions. So this is a code snippet. A method catches an exception using a combination of try and catch keywords. A try catch block is placed around the code that might generate an exception. So code within a try catch block is referred to as protected code. So anything which we write inside this try and catch, it will be considered as protected code. The code which is prone to exceptions placed in the try block. When an exception occurs, that exception occurred is handled by the catch block associated with it. Every try block should be immediately followed either by a catch block or by a finally block. A catch statement involves declaring the type of exception you're trying to catch. If an exception occurs in protected code, the catch block or blocks that follows the try is checked. If the type of exception that occurred is listed in a catch block, the exception is passed to the catch block much as an argument is passed into a method parameter. Now let's see an example. So there's a bkf exception test class. There's a main method. We have created an array of size 2, and then we are trying to access the 3rd position, which literally is the 4th position because its array starts from 0. And this code is surrounded by a catch block, array index out of bound exceptions, and finally we're printing out of the block. So this code compiles fine because everything has been taken care of, but when we try to run it, it is going to throw us a runtime exception or an unchecked exception, like this: exception throw Java lang array index out of bounds 3, if then we'll print out of the block. Okay, now let's see multiple catch blocks. So here's the syntax. First, we'll have a try block. Inside the try block, we are going to place our protected code, and this will be followed by multiple catches: catch 1, catch 2, and catch 3. Now let's see a code snippet. So this is the try block and 2 catches. So here's how we are going to perform a file operation, and in this line we are trying to print the file. So first of all, this code will not compile because file not found exception is narrower in scope and IO exception is broader in scope. So in order to resolve this, we have to place this code first, followed by IO exception. So file not found exception is a type of IO exception, that is why it has to come first.